Hello and welcome to IDFC First Bank presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 11. I'm Sunanda Jayaseelan. Tonight on this concluding part of our Springboard series here from New Delhi, we're continuing our conversation with G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant, where he's setting the agenda for India to capitalize on the Amrit Kal.
India scripted a historical way forward by assuming the G20 presidency on December 1, 2022. As a country committed to democracy and multilateralism, India's G20 presidential tenure will be a watershed moment in its history. Initiatives like Make in India, Digital India, and Startup India have already delivered rich dividends. With Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or the world is one family as our credo, today the world looks at India with positivity and promise. A promise to be the catalyst for global change. The 21st century is India's century for the taking. Joining us today is a public policy expert, former CEO of Niti Aayog and India's G20 Sherpa, Amitabh Kant, who will edify, educate and enthrall us on how India is on the cusp of exacting global change.
First of all, thank you for giving us this opportunity. I know you are pressed for time. What I want to understand from you is, this is a very critical year for India. One is obviously, we are on the cusp of becoming the most populous nation. We have in fact crossed that line already. And we are also the president for G20. And you are heading that initiative for India. There's a lot of hard work involved. First of all, if you can just summarize for the audience and for our viewers that how the presidency at this point in time, where the world is in a fragmented conflict of sorts, and there is still ever-growing divide between West and East, what is India's priority and role going to be during its presidency?
So I dwelt on some of these issues at length while speaking. There are two components of a G20 presidency. One is the substantive component, which is driven through the Sherpa track, which is 13 working groups. It's also driven through the finance track, which is, a lot of financial issues are discussed that and brought together. But the important thing to tell your audience is that actually India is doing this G20, and like many other countries which do it in one city, India is doing it in holding 215 meetings in 56 cities of India. And therefore, it's an opportunity to transform these cities, which many states have done, including Rajasthan, Maharashtra, all states, Uttar Pradesh recently. All of them are transforming these cities. So I was really, when we did the event, the Sherpa track meeting in Udaipur, we were delighted to see from Fatehpur Lake to everything was roads, etc. Everything was transformed. So similarly in Lucknow as a city was transformed totally in terms of lighting, beautification, everything. So it's a huge opportunity to really transform your cities, which can be a huge engine of new urbanization and growth. It's also an opportunity to push your soft power. So each state can use this opportunity to do its cultural programs, its handicrafts, its handlooms, and really push its own brand entity. Each state can build up its own brand entity, and that's what the Prime Minister has envisaged. So that's a massive opportunity. But in terms of geopolitics, the challenge is to bring everybody around. G20 works on consensus. So to be able to bring around everyone together on the same table by consensus is a challenge. We'd helped Indonesia to achieve consensus in Bali, and we are quite hopeful that India is well poised despite all the complexities, because you've reached 1 year of the geopolitical war, and there's massive tension. I mean, right now, despite all that, we are quite hopeful that as we go along, we should be able to achieve consensus on some of the pressing issues. Now, G20 is essentially an economic forum. It's not a forum to discuss security issues and war issues. They are discussed in the UN Security Council. But the war has economic implications in terms of food, in terms of fuel, in terms of fertilizer. So it has a spillover impact on G20. And that's why we found a way out in the in the statement in Bali, and we'll look forward to finding some innovative solution to push for issues which impact citizens. Because eventually, when leaders meet, they have to discuss on good leaders and top-class leaders, and especially our Prime Minister. His view is how do we improve the lives of citizens across the world? Those will be the issues to be discussed.
Right. Sir, you have in fact elaborated in your speech about a lot of initiatives that government has undertaken. What I want to understand from you is, the world is looking at India right now. I was in Davos a couple of weeks back, and India was referred to as the third emerging superpower over there also. We have seen the stress between US and China, including the latest balloon incident. We have seen the Russia-Ukraine war and how it is playing out. This puts a lot of responsibility on India. And then there is that entire conversation of global south. Then there are climate conversations. If you can break it down for us, that what is going to be India's priority, number one, and strategy to actually go ahead and deliver what world expects from India?
You know, the only answer to that is that India needs to achieve consistent rates of growth. Mr. Ahluwalia talked about 7%. I think India should aim for even, despite the global slowdown, India should aim at even higher rates and achieve that over a 3-decade period. I mean, through its Amrit Kal period. It's important thing is to understand is that we may be the 5th largest economy in the world. We may be heading towards the 3rd largest economy in the world. But there are other countries, I mean, starting from Singapore, Korea, Taiwan, China, they've grown at 10% per year for 2 decades or more. And there is no reason why India should not do this. And India should do this because it needs to raise the per capita income of its citizens. At the end of the day, there's a huge difference between growing at 7%, growing at 8% and growing at 9%, because the compounding power of growth is, I mean, the sheer compounding power of growth is so enormous that India needs to aim much higher. And it's important that centers carried out a lot of reforms in terms of ease of doing business, IBC, GST, RERA, etc. But you need about 12 to 13 states of India which need to fire on all cylinders. You need to grow on manufacturing, you need to grow on services, you need to grow on agricultural productivity, all 3 of them. And you need about champion states. So actually, leaders of tomorrow event should be held in states, not in Delhi.
We have, sir, 20 events, so we go across the country in all states. This is the launch pad, so this is the first event, but we'll go to 20 states in 20
Actually,
cities.
you should stop doing events in Delhi now.
It's so difficult to get you in Delhi. I don't know how you'll come to other cities,
No, I'll be very happy. Despite everything I landed up here, and I'll be very happy if you do it in states. I'll make sure that I do it virtually everywhere.
We'll make it a point, sir. Mr. Ahluwalia also raised a few concerns during his interaction. I want to touch upon 1 or 2 of them. One is obviously jobs. And obviously there is this lot of optimism and hope that because we are a young and now the most populous country, it is going to give us tailwind for next 20, 30, 40 years as far as growth is concerned. But jobs is a concern. Creating right kind of jobs at the right time, at the right place has always been a challenge. Not that it's a recent challenge, but how do we tackle that?
You know, first and foremost, India should create good quality jobs, not the Manrega kind of jobs. You know, it's very, very important that while Manrega may be important in some states, it's very, very important that India achieves consistently high levels of growth. The only way to create jobs is to grow at high rates. And if you grow at all these sunrise sectors of growth which I talked about, electric mobility, if you talk about battery storage, if you talk of green hydrogen, all these areas government is pushing for. Look at electric mobility, look at mobile manufacturing, look at the number of jobs Apple is now creating, look at the number of jobs Samsung is creating. All these are areas, you know, last year in the world, the total number of mobiles sold was more than the total number of vehicles sold in value terms. And therefore, these are completely new areas of growth. India should aspire to be the champion in all these 6 or 7 new emerging areas of growth, and you'll create jobs. There's no reason why you'll not create jobs.
Right.
And secondly, I think the biggest driver of job creation will be sustainable urbanization. We are doing you go from here to Jaipur, you'll see all these states are doing unplanned, unsustainable urbanization. We need to do good, really smart urbanization on the back of good public transportation with recycling of water. That'll become a huge, huge driver of growth. And that is my view, that the smart cities concept needs to be taken forward by the states in a very big way.
I'm going to take a quick commercial break on that note. We'll continue our conversations here on IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow's Springboard. That's on the other side. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow's Springboard. This is a series of very special conversations we're doing, talking about how entrepreneurs can capitalize on the Amrit Kal.
There's one more challenge that India faces, at least at this point, and it has nothing to do with our domestic issues. It's basically our neighborhood. So we have one neighbor who's almost defaulting. We have other neighbor who's threatening globalization. Then we have a distant but a close strategic partner who is at loggerheads with West. And in the middle of all of this, we have our own challenges in Indo-Pacific. You know, keeping all this in mind, it's going to be a real tightrope walk, not only for this year when we are the president of G20, but otherwise also. Because we are talking about Amrit Kal and the promise that the India holds. How do we tackle this?
So you'll always have these complexities, you'll always have these challenges. If you look at the history of when India has grown and grown rapidly, it's only, the periods when it grows rapidly at high rates is when you are able to push, exports in a big way. And therefore, India needs to do manufacturing. India needs to be globally competitive. The world is looking for alternative destinations, and that's why production-linked incentive scheme was brought in to bring size and scale of India's manufacturing. Without size and scale, it will be very difficult to do that. And when size and scale in India happens, you will do the backward integration to MSMEs, and all MSMEs will grow. And therefore, we must understand that PLI is for a limited period of 5 years, so that our companies grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and they get the incentive only when they are able to achieve those targets of higher targets. And that's why it's a very scientifically drafted scheme to enable companies to go bigger and bigger and bigger. And therefore, within that 5 years period, we must become a major manufacturing nation. That will create jobs, that will make you competitive, that will enable you to export to global markets. And all countries of the world who've grown at high rates of those which have penetrated global markets, particularly the US market. It's very important to penetrate the US markets, and therefore Indian manufacturers, we must understand this, that what you get in the domestic market, 5x of that you will get in the export market. And therefore you must work and penetrate global markets, and that means that we must become very, very competitive. I mean, there is a China plus one policy on, but for all these companies, and it's important to say this, that they will all come to India if we are globally competitive. The extent of dependency on China is, new investments may not be going, but there's a huge amount of dependency by the top 15 manufacturing companies on China even now. 90% production happening there. So if you want them to shift, which will happen in due course, but if you want to accelerate it, India needs to become more and more easy, more and more simple. It needs to be fully, that is what the government, that is what the Prime Minister is doing, making it easy, simple, digitizing. But now the action has to be in states. A lot of action. States must become the easiest and the simplest place to do business in.
Right. Since you mentioned China plus one, there was one more interesting term that at least I heard in Davos, and I'm sure you have also heard. It was ABC. And when I asked some of the global corporation CEOs that what do you mean, their answer was anywhere but China. So what is the truth in it? Because I understand China plus one, and like you rightly said, it's not so easy that you switch on and switch off your manufacturing in one country.
No, so, I've done an analysis of this. And, if you look at the top 15 American companies, the extent of their dependency on China is very, very high. And I can name these companies. I don't want to do this on television, but very, very high. And therefore, they may not be doing new investments there. But it's important that India is able to attract all new investment and over a period of time ensure that other investments also do that. But that'll require you to be a very integral part of global value chains. That'll involve you. The way manufacturing works in all these areas is that you have inputs coming in from all parts of the world. And therefore, on imports, our duty rates must be low. We must be very competitive. The end product must be top class in quality. We must be able to make better quality products. We must innovate. We must be, really world class in many of these areas, and that is what is necessary to do. And you'll attract investments from all over the world. Why should India not? India will do that. India will do that. You have many of these. Actually, Apple and Samsung are great examples of why India can achieve huge success in a very, very short period of time. And India must aim to be the biggest champion of electric manufacturing, battery storage, green hydrogen, 5G components. All these areas, India must aim to be the #1 manufacturer in the world. There's no reason why we should not be the world #1.
Right. I think that's the message for all emerging entrepreneurs who are present here. One last question to you, sir, because you did mention about states also putting in equal amount of efforts. And obviously, there is a disconnect because of the kind of structure we have. We have seen that in GST reforms also. 2-3 bullet points, if you can list down, which states should ideally do so it adds up to the national growth.
No, first of all, I must say that the kind of reforms which have been carried out in India during the COVID period and in the last 5 years have been enormous, just enormous. I mean, GST, IBC, RERA, lowering corporate taxes. I mean, we've a plethora of reforms and ease of doing business and many other things. I mean, I can go on naming them. I personally think that what has happened in the States is that over a period of time, we built up a lot of rules, regulation, procedures. Some of them have got scrapped in some states. But we've not yet fully scrapped and decriminalized a lot of state acts. We've not scrapped a lot. We need to do scrapping in bulk. Scrapping of rules, regulation, procedures, paperwork. No form should be more than half a page. Everything should be digitized. There should be no human intervention. You make that in states, business will grow. You'll create jobs.
Sir, one last question, and actually not a question, but what would be your advice, the emerging entrepreneurs, because in India, the emerging entrepreneurship is largely divided between startups and SMEs and MSMEs. Startups are obviously in a more glamorous space, but it is MSMEs and SMEs who are actually going to give India tailwind in the Industry 4.0 revolution. What would be your advice for them? Last question.
So just two things. Firstly, for MSME sector to grow, you need lots of large companies. So let's not be against large companies. There's a backward-forward integration. If you have large companies, you will have tier 2, tier 3 producers, and they will all be MSMEs. So I think India must aim to have many large companies. That's one. Number two, there is, to my mind, there's a need for a huge amount of credit flow to take place to the MSME, and the new account aggregator system which the RBI has built up based on data empowerment is an account aggregator system based on your credit history will enable a lot of credit flow to take place in the coming years. So you will see money flowing into the MSME sector. My only request is that aim to be the best. Don't ever aim to be the second best in terms of whatever you are doing. Just India has reached a stage of its growth where it should never do anything second class.
Absolutely. I think that's the main aspiration, aim to be the best. Thank you so much, sir, for coming here. Thank you.
That was a concluding part of the special Springboard series here from New Delhi. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any feedback for us, our contact details on your screens as we speak. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.